Welcome everyone, today we'll have another guide for Diablo 4, and today we'll be looking at our very first tier list for the beta of Diablo 4 characters, and there will be 5 characters. As you can see behind me, I have tried to categorize some of those stats into numbers so we can have a better comparison. And over here I have prepared a bit of notes what I was considering when I was ranking those characters, or character classes. So between Barbarian, Rogues, Sorcerers, and also Druid, and also Necromancer. Lots of notes I was taking, and I was also looking through different data and also what different stats will do for each character. So I want to give you guys a bit of comprehensive summary for the comparison of the characters you can pick from during beta. And the focus of this tier list, of course, is based on beta. So this tier list probably only go to level 25, and we can try to speculate for the future of the end game of the characters. Because over here, I have tried to find as much information online, on YouTube and also on Chinese forums. And I also found a character tested which was level 100 for the Barbarian. So we do have some insights of the potential of the future characters as well. Now, in order to give you guys a bit better demonstration, I also found a few clips of the character demonstrated online. So you can see different characters, sorcerers, you can see the summoning Necromancer, and you can see the Druid. So I try to give you guys some visual display of the characters, but the main focus will be comparing those numbers and also stats from different research, and we'll go through that together. Now coming over to our first character class of focus, and that will be the Barbarian. As you can see, the Barbarian is a melee focused character which focuses on both offense and also defense. The Barbarian have decent movement, mobility, and the Barbarian is very tough and very durable. So coming over to the Excel, you can see the Barbarian, I have ranked the Barbarian as 10 for defense, which is supposed to be the maximum rank for me. And going from offense and also mobility, I'm very high at 9, we'll explain very soon. The Barbarian have quite low resource regeneration as I had looked from different sources. Now the interesting thing is, the Barbarian stats bonus is actually quite nice. So in case you guys are not aware of the stat bonus, there is a flat stat bonus for all the class for acquiring those stats. But there's also a focus bonus or primary stats bonus for different classes. Currently only 3 of those were revealed, for Barbarians, Sorcerers, and also Rogue. Right away you can see the Barbarian have no effect with intelligence, and Sorcerers have no effect with strength. This does give them a slight advantage, because they only have to allocate skill points. Yes, you'll be allocating skill points for those classes into 3 of the choices of your stats. So for Barbarian, preferably will have strength for damage, dexterity for critical, and also willpower for resource regeneration. And usually the Barbarian will just focus on 2 of those. And this is one of the reasons he will likely have lower resource regeneration. He will probably go with strength and also dexterity. Now in terms of the class build and also customization, the Barbarian does seems to have a variety of weapons to choose from to use, but the downside is the Barbarian will have a similar playstyle, because I won't say exactly similar playstyle, but Barbarian want to use a variety of weapons. They have weapon advantage, they want to use certain weapons for critical, they want to use certain weapons for high damage. So in terms of that, it is a little less compared to other classes where you can tweak around into different elements of spells, different traps, and also different transformation, and also different entirety of the builds like Necromancer. Now in terms of both of the PvE and also PvP content, because most of the testers I had a look was only getting up to level 25. So the only tester I found that was saying things about Barbarian was this tester over here, who actually got to a level 100. Don't know how he got it from. So this is probably the Chinese closed beta. So from what they say about the Barbarian is quite good with all of the content with PvE. And in case of PvP, he's also quite strong. But that I might, argue a little bit, because maybe during beta the PvP is not that balanced. So just a small speculation for PvP. The Barbarian is likely, as a melee class, is going to be disadvantaged against other classes who can shoot across the screen like the Rogue and also the Sorcerers. And the Barbarian as a melee class is likely going to be controlled and also constantly slowed. Yes, you can leap, you can charge, but it is likely the Barbarian will have cooldowns, and when focus fired and when focus attacked by those range classes, the Barbarian will have a more disadvantage with PvP if certain situations happens. But I wouldn't say he's weak all the time, right? So I was a little low on the PvP, but I think as a melee class, it is quite difficult in PvP. And finally, the Barbarian skill tree is actually quite nice. You'll provide the Barbarians with a variety of sorts of, stats. So I think it's better I come over to the notes, right? So yeah, here is the summary of the Barbarian notes. I'll quickly go through with you guys and the reasons behind those stats. Maybe next time I talk about the notes, and then we'll talk about the stats. We'll see. So, as for the Barbarian, the resource regeneration actually comes from 3 of his shouts. The Barbarian have passive Fortify, which make him as one of the tankiest class out of the 5 of them. And of course, the offensive ability is the offensiveness of Barbarian allows him to bring 4 weapons together. So the Barbarian can equip multiple weapons, and this is one of his arsenal system perk. Having 4 of the weapon slots, the Barbarian can have 2 of the 2-hand weapons and 2 of the 1-hand weapons. And those can be consisted of legendary weapons with special effects and also, even high effects when they're 2-handed. And while equipping a variety of weapons, the Barbarian has the expertise ability, which allows him to, when he uses and also equip the weapons, to gain certain stats. For example, for 1-hand axe, he will gain your critical bonus. The Barbarian have considerably nice skill progression with the skill tree, gaining a lot of damage, defense, attack, party-wide debuff, damage reduction, and also mobility. So compared to most of other classes, the Barbarian can benefit a lot from the skill tree, and I think this is an advantage for perking through, at least for level 25, right? Now, in terms of legendary argument, the Barbarian will gain a lot of defense and also damage in terms of having more legendaries equipped and also having, different legendary items that is available to him because he can equip 12 items. Now, because the Barbarian have 3 different types of shouts, he can provide a lot of survivability and also buffing, and this is one of his main source of getting resource, and also he can provide faster movement and also mobility. In terms of the weakness for Barbarians, I had a look around, so it seems like he's a mostly melee class. He have a few range attacks, but it's not a lot. The Barbarian tend to have a long animation and also slow attack with his basic skills, which provides resource regeneration. And compared to most of the other classes, most of the classes have considerably weaker ultimate skills at level 25, and this is also the case for Barbarian. So that provides a summary, and those was some of the basic sorts of information, plus the top of the questions. So those are the same questions I asked for each of the characters. I get as much as information for each of them, and I go from there. And the Barbarian stats is preferably to go with strength for damage, dexterity for crit, and also willpower for resource regen. But most people will go with probably 2-to-1 with strength and also dex. So those were my reasons to rank the Barbarian this way, and overall I do think the Barbarian have a good offense and also defense, and because he's a frontliner, he tends to survive for longer, and this is one of the reasons I rank the Barbarian for S tier. Having additional weapons, having a lot of perks that just goes well with him, and also being quite easy on the hand and more durable. Now coming over to a second class, and this will be the Rogue. The Rogue is also a highly rated class with his mobility and also the rangeness and also the ability to avoid damage by staying far away from the enemy and also dodging. Rogue have a variety of spells that provides him to cast traps, to cast poison, to embed himself with elemental attacks. And also the Rogue is very, very mobile and also very, very versatile in terms of your choices. There's also common points, there's also, different perks that the Rogue can specialize into. Now coming over as a quick summary of the Rogue in terms of my ranking for the Rogue. Because the Rogue itself does not have any armor gain and not as many, fortify and also defensive gain as a Barbarian, the Rogue will focus majority on avoiding damage. And I'll just quickly show you guys the notes over here. So the focus of the Rogue, the disadvantage of the Rogue is that the Rogue avoids and also dodges damage. And having higher dexterity means the Rogue can dodge a lot of damages. But the difficulty is, once you take damage, your HP will drop quite rapidly, right? So you want to avoid as much damage as you can. But when you're lagging with internet, sometimes, or if you're playing hardcore, this can be very scary. Your HP can go from 100% to 0% very quickly if you get unlucky, right? So this is one of the disadvantage. The Rogue also is a bit scared of the melee attack gap closers who, rushes in your face. And also the traps the Rogues provide have seemingly limited range in terms of offensive powers. They are pretty nice defensively, but offensively they might not have the range and also effect you wanted. The stealth mechanics were said to be a little weaker during the beta testing for level 25. Now that we talk about the disadvantage, I'll go through some of the advantage of the rogue with you guys. So over here you can see I have given the rogue a 7 for defense, but a 9 for offense and also 10 for mobility. So one of the reasons for that is the offensiveness of the rogue actually comes from the range attacks, and also a lot of range weapons do excel in higher damage scaling for the further away you are from enemy. The rogue have a variety of mobility skills which allows you to clear content fast. So this means you can speed run, you can flash farm, you can do all sorts of content at a very fast rapid rate. And if you're not playing hardcore, this means, you might run into a bunch of enemies that die, but most of the time, you'll be clearing the content at a much faster speed. So high damage, high mobility means that the gameplay of the rogue will be very enjoyable, at least from what the testers were saying to level 25. Now, rogue have some decent basic attacks, and the ability to embed himself with dark, shadow, and also cold damage means he can do, AoE damage, he can do crowd control, and also he can do single target damage. So you can see the embedded skills over here, cold for control, poison for single target, and also shadow for AoE damage. So this is one of the reasons I give the rogue pretty decent resource regen compared to the barbarian. Rogue is on 8. And in terms of the bonus stats, the rogue actually wants the dexterity, strength, and also intelligence and willpower. Because the rogue, compared to the other two classes that was available, the rogue actually can make use of all 4 of the stats. But this makes it a little difficult which one you want to select. Most people will go with offense with strength and dexterity. Maybe actually offense will be dexterity with willpower. Wait, hold on. Offense rogue will be dexterity with intelligence for the skill damage and also for the increased chance of critical. They keep changing this around, so different characters will have different stats. So the stats, in case you guys want it, I'll give you guys a link for it as well. So the stats over here, this is the same for all the class for all 4 of the stats. But here is the difference for those 3 classes for now. Now, in terms of character customization and also PvE and also PvP, the rogue is said to be excelling a bit better in terms of the range attack with the bow. So the melee attack, the stealth kind of mechanics is a little bit weaker for the rogue compared to the range attack. So the specialization is not highly compared to the sorcerers or probably the druid, who have a variety of choices. In terms of PvP, because the rogue can flash farm and also can rapidly push through the content with high damage, high mobility, so I've given the rogue the highest of the content clear for PvE. And because the rogue excels in dodging and also dealing damage from afar, the PvP aspects of the rogue is likely going to be very high. And with the right items, the rogue can probably kill most of the classes before they even see the rogue on the screen. But that's the hope, right? Maybe it's not that balanced. And finally, for the skill tree, I think the rogue skill tree have a variety of choices in terms of mobility, in terms of different traps, range attack, and also melee attack. And because of that, the rogue, there's too many choices, and sometimes you might take the wrong path. There's a lot of testing you could be done with the rogue, so customization. But the downside is, unlike barbarian, maybe the rogue skill tree is too versatile and too widely spread. So currently, that's why I give the rogue 8 out of 10 compared to the barbarian. And finally, in terms of the tier ranking for the rogue, the rogue actually have considerably better ultimate, as I saw from some of the beta testers. So it was mentioned that the Shadow Clone will give the rogue unstoppable. And what that means is the rogue will be immune to freeze, to any of the crowd control from enemies, which is generally most of the things that kills your character, right? So I have ranked the rogue similar to the barbarian as S tier. As we're going to go further, you're going to see I ranked other 3 classes, the Sorcerers as A tier, Druid as A tier, and also Necromancer as A tier. And let me explain why. So coming over to the Sorcerers. The Sorcerers, the mages, like in Diablo, it's always one of the crowd favorite. It is the caster class, it is very powerful with spells, and it has also versatility. The Sorcerers in Diablo 4 focus on lightning, cold, and also fire damage. And, in terms of character specialization, it is very powerful for all 3 of those. On top of that, the Sorcerers also have a perk in Lucky Hit, having greater chance of proccing any of the effects on the weapon and also on the skills. So the Sorcerers is quite flexible and also versatile. But there are some disadvantages with the Sorcerers as well, as we're going to see over here. So starting with our ranking and also, comparison with the Sorcerer. The Sorcerer seems to be not that defensive, of course, compared to the Barbarian, but the Sorcerer seems to be a little better than the Rogue, having a bit of the shield and also a lot of the damage reduction after casting spells. In terms of offense, the Sorcerer as a range class have great offense ability, and also dealing a lot of damage in terms of fire element. So, coming over to our notes, you can see that the Sorcerer, we'll talk about each of those after, the Sorcerer actually have the elemental builds which are massively powerful in terms of the lightning build for melee and also AoE damage, in terms of the fire build for huge fire damage and also for a lot of lucky procs, different effects and also different, ability procs for your weapons. And also the Sorcerer does a lot of cold damage which controls the enemy almost indefinitely. So this allows the Sorcerer to be excelling a lot in terms of the PvP combat and also content. Now compared to the Barbarian and also the Rogue, the Sorcerer actually have a lightning form which allows the Sorcerers to constantly regen a lot of resource, and the spells of the Sorcerer seems to be a little, better, and also she tend to get a little more resource compared to the Barbarian, of course. The Sorcerer, similar to the Barbarian, it also have only of the 3 of the stats that the Sorcerers want. The Sorcerers does not want strength, at least from the main primary stats perspective. The Sorcerers will go with intelligence for damage and also dexterity for crit for now. This might change though, just keep in mind. And this allows the Sorcerer to have a slight advantage in picking the stats, because you're only picking out of the 3, right? And you're probably going for damage and also crit. And if you lack on resource regen, you can go on for willpower. But if you don't like that, you can just focus on 2 of the stats. Now in terms of class customization, PvE and also PvP. So coming back to our notes over here, the Sorcerer actually have a special mechanics I want to explain to you guys. I'm sure you have heard of this many times. If you haven't, I'll quickly explain this. It's called a lucky hit chance. So some weapons and some items might have a 20 or 10% chance to proc a certain effect. Maybe slow, maybe freeze, or maybe, some kind of effect, maybe ignite. So the Sorcerers here, depending on the modifiers of your skills and also items and also weapons, you can be increasing the trigger chance. So for example, a weapon have 20% chance of slow. Your skill have a modifier of 50%. So the calculation, your basic calculation, will be 20% plus the 50% modifier, which will give you 30% trigger chance. But the Sorcerers on top of that will have additional lucky hit chance. And the lucky hit chance goes especially high with Hydra. And this allows the Sorcerers to proc a lot of the effects, and this can be devastating against enemies who try to get close to you. And also this can be very powerful in terms of PvP, because the more you proc, the slower the enemy gets, the more debuff they get, and the weaker it is for them to get to you. And because the Sorcerer is also a range class, he or she can be even powerful than the Rogue. And because the Rogue is range class but don't proc as much, the Sorcerer can be very special in terms of PvP, in terms of crowd control. And I've seen some, Diablo 3 PvPs, the Sorcerers can also hit across the map as well. And finally, in terms of the class skill tree progression, the Sorcerers can focus on one of the elements. In terms of lightning, melee, or you go with fire usually for massive damage, and maybe a bit of cold damage. So the Sorcerers in terms of that also have a really nice skill tree. So compared to the Barbarians who focus on all the benefits, the Sorcerers can focus on one of the elements. And I think this is the advantage of the Sorcerers, but I also had to look at some of her disadvantages. So in terms of her weakness also comes from the ultimate skills. Now, because most beta testers were looking at the class when they're level 25, it is hard to differentiate how strong those classes will be in the future. But during the beta, while we're capped at level 25, she is likely going to have a weak ultimate skill compared to the Rogue, at least for now. Now, the Sorcerer herself does have a bit of shielding and damage reduction, but it is harder for her to find Fortify and also Unstoppable, which reduce damage taken and also makes you immune to crowd control. Finally, the Sorcerer is likely going to have a bit of limited mobility. Her greatest mobility comes from Teleport, which gives her a lot of things, grants Unstoppable, dealing damage, increase your damage on certain spells, granting damage reduction, and also granting cooldown reduction. But while Teleport is on CD, or Teleport is on cooldown, the Sorcerers might be limited into some mobility, and this was said to be one of her disadvantages. Maybe with higher levels of the character, after the beta, we can see the Sorcerers will have better mobility. But currently, the best mobility will be for the Rogue at rank 10 over here compared to the Sorcerer. So I did give her quite high mobility, but this is just because maybe you have the teleport cooldown ready. If you don't have teleport, she might be a little weaker. Now, coming over to the next class, we have the Necromancer. I was quite excited for this one. You can see the Necromancer can deal physical damage with bone, can do lifesteal with blood, and also can summon an army. The Necromancer can also debuff enemies. So the Necromancer is quite interesting. What I'll do is, I'll group the Necromancer with Druid over here. So you can also see the final class will be Druid. The Druid is great in terms of instant transformation, melee damage. The Druid also does earth and also I believe was a cold magic damage. I'll check after. The Druid can transform into a warbear and also a werewolf, dealing physical damage, which helps him to deal additional damage with the companions, as you can see the wolves over here. So one of the reasons we're grouping two of those classes is because some of the stats and also information for those classes is not as readily available. For example, as over here, we can see the primary stats for Barbarian, Sorcerers and also Rogue, but not the final two class. And because of this, you can see I do have some question marks in terms of the stat bonus, and also in terms of the other specialization and characterization for those characters. So I have to admit guys, my research on those two characters is not as intensive compared to the first three. So the ranking for those characters might not be as accurate compared to the first three. Now coming over to our notes, you can see I actually missed the order a little bit. So the first one is actually, fourth one is character is actually Druid. The final class was actually Necromancer. So in terms of the Druid, what I found to be advantage of the Druid is the instant transformation of the Druid, but it does have a time limit duration. The Druid can also cast earth and also storm spells. I believe that's also lightning spells. And this allows the Druid to also deal percentage damage against the enemy, which could be useful. The Druid can summon companions to attack. Oh, sorry, the Druid does not need to summon companions. They calls out companions to attack. The Druid also seems to have a special quest line of looting system, which allows the Druid to offer to spirit animals for bonuses up to 6 offense and also 6 defensive passives. Yes, I'm trying to find as much information as I can with those classes, and in the future I'll be making a proper build guide. So here I just want to get a few of the classes and then try to compare them with other class which will have more information. So here you can see I rank the Druid defensively as 9, pretty high, because the Druids have a choices of going to the Werebear. And also in terms of offense, the Druid seems to be very flexible. Magical damage, physical damage, and also damage from companion. Because the Druid is a melee class, it is likely its mobility won't be as high as other classes. And unless, we find more of the mobility with him, but he seems to be quite durable and quite slow. In terms of resource regen, the Druid can probably have a rapid basic attack with the werewolf, and maybe the companions can also provide more regen. So I gave him a higher regen. We don't know the stats for the Druid yet, because that's not revealed. My thoughts is that it will probably go with strength and also intelligence. Or maybe if you're going for physical damage, you go with strength. And if you go with magical damage, you might go with intelligence. Now for the build and also class customization, PvE and also PvP. In terms of the Druid, I think there is going to be a lot of variation and also customization. You can focus on one of the transformations, just like the World of Warcraft, the Druid and also Moon King. I've seen Druid, tank, DPS and also does magic. So there will be a lot of creation and also flexibility. In terms of PvE, I think most of the classes should be fine in terms of PvE. They wouldn't release a class that's not great for PvE, right? And in terms of PvP, the Druid will face the same difficulties compared to, similar to the Barbarian. It is a more melee class. Yes, it will have magic, but its range damage is likely not going to be as strong as Rogue and Sorcerers. And if you're going for a magic Druid, then wouldn't a magic Sorcerer be stronger in PvP? So this is my thought. Maybe I'm too harsh on the Druid. Maybe I should give the Druid maybe 8 for the magic damage and also range and also different companions. Now, as we're quickly coming over to the Necromancer, the final class. Oh gosh, I didn't know the video was this long, right? My voice is definitely dead. So I rank the Necromancer as A tier, and also the Necromancer seems to have a lot of things I was hoping for, but it also have a lot of things, not as I was hoping for, right? It is very similar, class to the Diablo 3 Necromancer. There is a wide range of choices of weapons. The Necromancer can also use a scythe. The Necromancer is a summoner that can also use corpses. So, from the beta currently, there are 4 different playstyles. The Necromancer can go with Bone for physical damage, Darkness for damage over time, and also Blood for lifesteal. And finally, the Necromancer can always summon his army using corpses and also skeletons for skeleton warriors and also skeleton mages. The Necromancer special, customization comes with the Book of the Dead. It allows him or her to customize his summons, making the skeleton warriors into better damage dealers, but weaker, defensively, or more defensively with shield and more tanky and durable. And also he can customize his mages. The Necromancer was set to also be able to sacrifice his summons for permanent buffs. I'm not sure exactly how that works, so we'll find out. Definitely try off the mid-beta. So in terms of offense and also defense, I give the Necromancer higher offense compared to defense. So notice it's like the reverse of the Druid. So here is 9 and 8. I give the Necromancer 8 and 9. In terms of mobility, if we look at the video, so here you can see the Necromancer was getting off a month. So this was showed during one of the previous teasers. I do think the Necromancer will be a little lack of mobility. Maybe it is transferred in terms of his ability to summon more minions and also more defense and also offense capacities. So mobility for Necromancer is likely not going to be the top compared to the Rogue or the Sorcerers. In terms of resource region, because the Necromancer have so many flexibility with customization, it is likely he is going to be sitting at quite high resource because you don't have to summon skeletons all the time, right? And if you're going for a summoning build like me, I'll definitely try a summoning build. I think I should be okay on resource, but unless you're doing additional damage and also additional spells. In terms of the stat bonus, we also does not know about the stats for the Necromancer. So the stats for over here, I'm guessing that maybe he will go with willpower, maybe intelligence. And if you're going for a physical build, maybe for the bone, the bone casting, maybe you'll go with the strength. So it is unknown for this particular class as well. And finally, coming over to the class customization for the Necromancer. Because there is a variety of the build in terms of different playing styles, but most of the players tend to mix the playing styles. Let's say you want to do your physical damage while you have your army up. If you're low on health, you go with blood for a bit of lifesteal. And if you're facing single target enemies and the enemies you want to kind of torment and also, does a lot of damage over the time, you'll use darkness spells. So unlike the mage, which have like a refound build in terms of all the elements, the Necromancer may be merging some of the build and you may be shifting different playing styles depending on your summons. So Necromancer will definitely focus on the summons. So I think the Necromancer will have a really good PvE clear, and most of the time, if you play Necromancer, sometimes your minions will kill everything for you before you even see them. In terms of PvP, I'm not sure how strong the summons will be, because if the summons are too strong, you'll kill the players before you see them, and they'll be too OP, right? The AI will just kill all the players with skeletons. But if it's a little weaker, it's hard to tweak it, right? So the Necromancer is probably in the middle phase for me. He is flexible because you can do range with your bone arrows. You can be defensive, you can be offensive. But not having enough information during beta makes it much difficult to rank this properly. So hopefully you guys found this helpful. Oh my gosh. So what happened was I initially tried to do some research for myself as to what class to pick, and let's compare them. So I wrote a lot of things, as you can see, I can sit over here to pick, and I tried to research as much as I can and take lots of notes. And then I was like, hey, why don't I make Excel and compare them and make a tier list? So I did all that, and then I tried to make a video. And it is a little long. And if you guys did go through all the video, thank you so much for watching it, guys. And I will be updating this in the future with better footages. Yes, my footages are not great, but old beta footage I said. And also I'll show you the animations, different skills, and also different comparison. When the open beta comes, we'll be testing a lot more for those classes. Now before you go, and if you guys didn't know, we have a new YouTube channel. So I just started a YouTube channel with my girlfriend yesterday, and you can see this is only 12 hours old, this YouTube channel. And if you guys haven't subscribed, make sure you subscribe and check out the behind the scenes and also fun clips and also more stories about us. And then you get to know me a little more personally instead of just reading the news and also the games, right? So I want to share a little bit more with you guys. So make sure you check this channel out if you're interested about Matt and also Uni. She's really funny too, and she's really shy. So I want to give her a surprise and do a shout out for the new channel to get some subscribers. Thank you guys. I'll see you guys next time.